Hello, and you're welcome to this episode of the AFNIS Insights. Today we are at the second day of the 5th edition of the Africa Natural Resources and Energy Investment Summit. My name is Patrick Mulindwa. I'm Chief of Staff of the Africa Mineral Strategy Group. The conversations from day one, even when we actually arrived here, in Nigeria, the energy is totally different. For some of us who come from East Africa, we are just 45 million in Uganda when you land in Nigeria anywhere. So we landed in Abuja, where the conference is happening. Nigeria is 2 million people plus. I feel like I'm in a continent. So, anyways, we want to, go a little bit in depth to some of the conversations that have been taught at the 5th edition of the Africa Natural Resources and Energy Investment Summit. And today on the set we have Professor Kevin Chika. You have heard of him. You have either been in a conference where he's made you sit and wonder whether Africa can't really grow, because he will give you research that is so applicable. Today I had a chance to sit back the last part of his presentation, and I had him say something that we need to mobilize cash, so to invest in those areas that have very low appetite for foreign money. In this case, in the mining sector, which is exploration. However, he says we can actually do this, which is domestic resource mobilization, without necessarily increasing the tax. The African countries where tax is this way and the other way, and the government seems to be on the other side and the people on the other side. So, Prof. Chika, and I would ask you to sit back a little bit so that you could tell us a little bit in depth of his presentation at this 5th edition of AFNIS. Prof, you're welcome to this episode of the AFNIS Insights.
Thank you.
Somebody watching would like to know you a little bit, Prof.
Okay, thank you very much. I am Professor Kevin Chika Urama. I'm the Chief Economist and Vice President for Economic Governance and Knowledge Management at the African Development Bank Group. It's really a pleasure to be here as a speaker at the Africa Natural Resources and Energy Investment Summit. This year focusing on One Africa, One Resources. And I've always in my presentations here reflected on what I call the Africa's paradox. The paradox is we have all the resources that is required to do development, and that is why we have many explorers from many years ago coming into the continent and continuing to come into the continent. And the continent, though, is doing well with regard to GDP growth rates, and we are becoming the fastest growing region in the world, with many African countries doing very well with regard to GDP growth rates. But when you drill down how that growth rate are being translated to the welfare, well-being of citizens in the continent, we are doing poorly. We are doing poorly because even though our GDP growth rate is growing at over 4.4% in 2025, and despite the global shocks we're having, including the Middle East crisis, the growth rate will only slow down to about 4.0% if the war continues up to 6 months. And this is much higher than in many other regions of the world, and also much better than the impacts we see in many other regions of the world. And the reason is because Africa has a diverse continent, diverse people, diversified economies, but more importantly, huge mineral wealth that we continue to tap. So whenever a shock comes, prices go up. Some countries in Africa are benefiting, some are losing, and then it evens out. And then when the shock stops, the price rise in the commodities, in this case in energy, food and fertilizer benefits many countries in Africa that are natural resource rich. But when you look in depth, you find that we are not able to harness that opportunity, windfall that people may call because of the price hike, because of structural challenges in our economy, the way we relate with mining mineral resources, which means quite often we issue, you know, mining licenses to companies and contracting ourselves for several years.
Exactly.
So we've basically leased out that resource and we don't have access to the windfall that come. And also structural challenges in production, like in the oil and gas industry and so on. So we cannot very quickly adjust to benefit from the windfalls that come from the market. But again, the more important thing is that our per capita income is not doing as well as our GDP.
Yes.
And even though we are growing fast in GDP growth rate, we are growing very slowly in terms of, we are growing fast in GDP per capita, but we are not reaching the mark to be able to reduce poverty and create jobs for people in this continent. And for me, until the wealth of the continent reaches everybody on the continent, we are not doing well. But if when we continue with the conversation, I will then explain to you how that relates with the subject we are discussing. Because if you try to disaggregate how countries are performing, you find that the countries that have huge deposits of natural wealth on the continent are not doing well, are not doing as well as they ought to do. And then countries that have less natural resources, that are non-resource intensive countries, and depending on tourism and other things, many of them in Eastern Africa region where you come from, are doing much better. And then I can't understand, how is it that you have gold and you are begging for money? And those who don't have,
yes, exactly.
So that's the challenge that we need to unpack in this AFNIS discussion.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prof. And I like the way you picked it up. And I want to. Everything is excitingly true and honestly practical on what you've said. I mean, you're able to have a lens on these countries on quite a number of issues which are very important in terms of capital. You've spoken to, at the introduction, somewhere I think you were closing on your presentation. You said, I like the vision. So the theme of the conference, one Africa, one resource vision. And you put a disclaimer there too, as you said, but how are we able to achieve this if we cannot really move into each other's boundaries? I wanted to get a thought. I mean, you did point out Mr. Dangote's, he has always made this boldly to heads of countries where he's been in Rwanda. He talked about this. But what's your thought? Is it something that we should, what keeps it going? Are countries making more money out of the visas? What is the economics into the thing?
Okay, the economics into this is more of the political economy rather than cash economy. It's not about fiscal resources that the continents make from visas and so on, but basically historical dependencies that has driven, Africa was divided and born. No African state was there. So, and what has happened, if I relate it more to what we're talking about, the natural resources, we can't have one Africa, one resources. That's a great vision. And I applaud the organizers of AFNIS for focusing on it. And our minister from Nigeria has always been a thought leader and seeing tomorrow, today. So that's very good. But to make that to happen, we need to have free movement of capital. And that free movement of capital will mean human capital, fiscal capital, and equipment, and all these things needs to be able to move freely. Because the continent is divided in such a way that we have shallow capital markets. So each country will not be able may not be able to gain the resources required, huge capital intensive resources required for exploration, for example, or for set geospatial data development, for example. So, but if we pull together as one Africa, then we're able to be able to mobilize those resources. And as I have explained in my presentation, we have done the analysis, we have crunched the numbers, and we see that the continent has a huge potential in mobilizing domestic resources alone. Tax revenue can be increased on the continent by 469 billion US dollars.
I loved when you said that we can actually collect more tax without increasing
tax rates. It's simply about improving the social contract with citizens. When you are talking, you said government is there, citizens are there. There is a reason. The reason there is because the implicit tax for citizens are very high. In countries where a citizen will have to sink his own borehole, get his own generator to provide electricity, probably build the roads, provide security, they're already paying a lot of taxes implicitly. So if we are able to strengthen the social contract between governments and citizens, simply by government simplifying the tax code, making sure that there's fiscal prudence in how public resources are used visibly, and country citizens can see that the resources, the taxes they pay are actually being used to implement those things that they would otherwise implement. Our research shows us that many Africans would want to be able to enter the tax bracket freely without any command and control system. So that voluntary tax payment can now increase simply by addressing the social contract between citizens and government. And the rule of the game is improve public services. If you improve the quality of public service delivery, citizens will see that, and it doesn't make economic sense for an individual to try and get a generator instead of pay for electricity. It doesn't make sense for individuals to want to build roads. These are capital intensive things that public resources can do, or provide health care, or provide education, and so on and so forth. So it is a two-way thing. Citizens have to play their role to participate in governance by paying their fair share of taxes. But then governments have to play their role in assuring citizens through action that those taxes are being utilized to provide those services that is supposed to be done. And that is why the African Development Bank has developed last year, in 2025, we launched an African Public Service Delivery Index that maps the delivery and quality of delivery of public services by each sector, by each country, so that we're able to have standardized, independent data to be able to hold citizens, our governments public servants accountable on how these public services are being delivered.
Thank you so much.
Before I stop on this, non-tax revenues alone, again, which are the levies that we can get on things, is able to mobilize about $311.4 billion additional without doing anything more different from just adopting best practices that have already been done in Europe and other countries of the world. So we have over $780 billion waiting to be harnessed. So for me, if we focus on fiscal prudence and addressing some of these challenges, we have huge resources to be able to do our exploration, geospatial mapping, and so on, without relying on external resources, which come with its own risks, because it's volatile. And second, who owns the data? Exactly. You develop when it's being funded from outside, and data sovereignty and so on will be very difficult to define. And if you have the private sector coming in to do the geospatial mapping, this is the private sector. The value construct of any private investor is the bottom line, to make money. So why would the private sector actor actually declare to you your full resources if he's going to buy the mine? So that's what I'm saying, that we have the resources. We need to focus on how we harness it. Our pension funds. That's like latest in group. The institutional investors. Pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, our banks, our insurance companies hold about $4 trillion of assets under management. And my brother, we're only investing about 2.7% of it. Just think of doubling it. And there are billions of dollars available for us.
Yes.
Now think about our high net worth individuals. 2.5 trillion US dollars that they are controlling. African high net worth individuals.
And most of them are in Nigeria.
In Nigeria, in many other countries. Look at what Dangote has done. In the That's an example of how creating policy environments that allows African resources to work for Africa can help us to achieve the dream of one Africa, one resource vision.
Yeah.
And part of it is what you talked about, movement of capital.
Yes.
If Dangote, like I've mentioned, needs about 32 visas to travel around the continent, why would he be stressing himself? He should be begging this man to come along.
You can go to the EU.
You can go to the EU, go and all those places.
You don't visit.
And our other people can actually now come in freely also onto the continent.
Yes.
You go to the EU, you have a Schengen visa, one visa, you can go everywhere. So investment barriers need to be removed. And that's what we need to do. And finally, we also need to think about our diasporans.
Exactly.
You and I was just talking, I was talking to a colleague inside the room where African continent, our diasporans last year mobilized 104.8 billion US dollars for remittances. That's just for consumption smoothing. Oh, my mother is sick, I'm sending her to school and hospital and so on. 104 billion. And our research shows us that we can move that to 1.1 trillion just by creating instruments to make that resources investable. So we have pots of capital that are there for us to mobilize. All we need is to create the environment for it, create the instruments for it, mobilize it properly, and invest it properly on the continent. But the sad thing is that the continent is losing so much resources on the continent because of poor regulatory environment, because of risk perception. 74 billion.
And Prof, that is where actually I'd wanted you to highlight a little bit because oh man, the issue investing in mining is huge. This is huge sums of money, and a project will only start pointing towards paying back after 7 years. What do you have to say about the political issues? Because I'm tired of calling them instabilities all the time. But the political certainty, because I mean, when the money was coming outside Africa, you would say that it's not my money. I mean, but then you would see most of these investment vehicles really quiz you over assuring them on political stability. Now that we are saying the money can still come from within us, we too become investors that should be cautious about where the money is going. So we will ask questions of political certainty. I would like you to, what is it that we need to crack? Because there's also a case where most of the African countries that are endowed with minerals have a lot of conflict within. You know, investment is what we need, but that will not either be an appetite for a local investor if it has not been for a foreign investor. What is it that we need to do? It doesn't matter where the capital is coming from. We all ask the same questions. Will it be safe in that country? What do we need to do to increase the flow of capital within country?
Okay, first, the global financing system we have today does not benefit Africa and many poor countries because the cost of capital is linked to risk ratings.
Okay.
And risk ratings in many countries in Africa, countries are rated poorly simply because of poverty and low per capita incomes. And that is one of the reasons. It's not only because of poverty, but that's a major part of it.
Yes, exactly.
Like I showed in my presentation, there's a very high correlation between per capita income and risk ratings of countries, which means the poorer you are, the more you are likely to be downgraded in terms of your ratings and the higher the cost of capital.
Exactly.
So accessing capital, whether it's domestic or foreign, will become very expensive for countries. How do we address this? Grow our economy. Let us just try and ensure that higher growth rates in GDP trickles down to
people.
people,
Yes.
so that per capita income on the continent will improve. So if that improves, we can begin to de-risk our capital markets and be able to access resources in a cheaper way. Now, the other aspect of it is simple. Macroeconomic stability.
That's it.
There is no, everywhere in the world I have looked, there is no substitute for macroeconomic stability.
Exactly.
Because I always say that money, capital is like water. In my village, we dig ponds in the backyard to collect rainwater
Yes.
when the rain falls. Well, that's when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And now, the larger your pond, the more the water you get. And if your pond is leaking, before you come home or wake up, the water has gone back to where it came from. So we need to ensure that we block these leakages. That is, removing, we create the instruments that will attract capital. Macroeconomic stability, fiscal prudence, efficiency, accountability, regulatory predictability, and all those things. We know the solutions. You create that, capital will come. But then when the capital comes, we make sure that there's reduced corruption, reduce inefficiencies in public finance investment in public sector, which is costing the continent about $299 billion. So if we're able to plug the leakages, then it's like we have a pond that has the water that will not dry very fast because it's leaking. This continent is losing over 500 and
financial leakages.
Yes, financial leakages. $587 billion. And then inefficiency in infrastructure investments, 299 billion. That's huge. And if we're able to trap that and we're able to mobilize the tax and non-tax resources, we're able to entice our institutional investors, our high net worth individuals, and our diasporans, we will not only have enough resources to do our minerals development, but we will become donors, as many as well. And then finally, we have been talking about mining. And I keep repeating also in this meeting that focus on mining is an extractive mindset. So we need to move towards what Minister Alake was saying, that we need to, it's not just saying value addition in words, but we need to move towards a stoppage in issuing mining concession agreements to what I call minerals development agreements.
Definitely.
So instead of issuing licenses for people to come and dig debts and remove them to go and produce in Europe and America and others and come back to sell finished products at factors of 10 or 20 to us, why not issue contracts for people to develop those resources on our soil? Because our analysis have shown on the critical mineral sector, for example, that doing so in Africa, in DRC Congo, that has large cobalt and other things, is 3 times cheaper than mining the ore, and taking the ore, keeping it all, producing and coming back to sell us the batteries. So it's good business for the investors, both global and local, but also it's good for green transition because you reduce the carbon footprint of the shipments and so on and so forth. But it's also good for sustainability of your business because it will create jobs for citizens. So people are not going to fight where they get their food. Where you will have jobs for youth and women. Technology transfer will happen. Infrastructure will happen. Infrastructure will come, and then also GDP per capita will grow, and cost of capital will go down. So it's a virtuous cycle. So we need to turn the linear cycle of extracting minerals for exports to a virtuous cycle of mineral development agreement. And it doesn't take another person to do it. It's the African government that can do it. And then finally, sometimes we say, where is the money going to come from? If you create that environment that allows the capital to come, you will not beg for money to come. There is capital in the world.
This is not just the first time you said it. Last year at AFNIS, you said it. You said it again here. And I've heard of DRMPs, they're using them here, but I think we're not exhausting the opportunity.
I am happy to see the leadership that is being shown by AFNIS and several of the ministers who are here, including Minister Lake. If you went on the field visit on the first day, you see the amazing things that's going on. So it's for me, it's about scaling it. You heard the governor from His Excellency, the governor from Nasarawa State, talking about the lithium plant that is being developed. But we need to do that at scale in many places. Because at the moment, what we're having is we'll have pockets of leadership that gets the idea, and then they are doing quite the much they can, but scale matters. So that's why I'm saying, why can't we as Africans come together and look at subsidiarity principle, and then also collaboration principle and complementarity to say, okay, Nigeria, oil and gas. Have a lot of it. Let's put in, what Dangote has done, and then expand it. And then let's expand the kind of investment that has done in East Africa, in every other place. Then we will not worry when there's a problem crisis at Hormuz and several other places. And then on cobalt, find a country that have the highest deposits. Let's come together, build together. This is what Africa was before it was divided. But today, we're actually emphasizing the divisions through our visa policy, and we are holding on to this, and so on. And the erroneous thinking is that, oh, when we open up our borders, the place will be flooded by who? I really don't know. Because people who are going to be able to travel are people coming to add value to your economy. And that is how many other countries were built. The United States of America, what built the US? We were forced into these countries, our forefathers. They actually worked. Now we are dying to go back. So Professor Kevin, Professor Kevin Chika, I want to thank you so much. And for our audience, please, thank you so much for keeping yourself on the AFNIS Insights. If you've got a question for us, or specifically Professor Chika, please leave it in the comment section. Professor Chika is the Chief Economist and Vice President at the Africa Development Bank. Professor, it's always a pleasure to have you into these conversations, and please, thank you so much for giving us part of your limited time. Thank you so much. And let me commend again what the Africa Minerals Strategy Group is doing, and commend the leadership of our minister and the Secretary General and all the ministers who are part of this, and also the government of Nigeria, who now chairs this group. And then also commend all the participants who have consistently come, the private sector and others, to look for ways that we can make Africa's resources work for Africa's development. Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you so much. So it's a pleasure having you. Thank you.